Are you filled with fear, doubt, worry about the future of our country? Do you feel the urgency to act before it's too late? If yes, then this podcast is for you. It's time for us to confront the critical issues threatening our nation's fabric, our democracy itself, regardless of our political stance. If you are ready to face reality, handle the tough questions, and find real solutions, then here's your host, Debilyn Molineaux.
Hi, welcome to the Terrified Nation podcast. I'm your host, Debilyn Molineaux. Can we save it? That's what we're exploring in this podcast series. And for me, the answer is yes, we can. And we must. This show is where we explore alternatives to being afraid. We ask ourselves the questions like, what now? And we interview guests who have gone from being afraid or angry or even feeling hopeless to become advocates for our nation so that we can dedicate ourselves to live into the promise of our founders. And I do like to start each show with a question that we'll explore together. Today's question is, how might our beliefs about each other get in the way of us recognizing our shared humanity? And joining us today is Zach Elwood. Now, Zach is a former professional poker player, and he's also the host of the psychology podcast, People Who Read People. He got interested in working on reducing toxic polarization, and that led him to writing the books Diffusing American Anger and How Contempt Destroys Democracy. He also helps out organizations in the depolarization and bridge building space, including Builders, which was formerly called Starts With Us. And you can learn more about his work at america-anger.co. And you'll hear more about that at the end of the podcast. So welcome to the show, Zach.
Thanks, Debilyn. Thanks for having me.
Now, you came on, I just want to I'm going to out you because you came on not knowing what this interview was going to be about. And you thought we were going to appeal to your expertise in this depolarization, and we're not.
I didn't know what to expect, but I'm always ready for anything.
Yeah, well, you're actually participating in a research project, a national research project, where we imagine a future we want to live. And it's one that we want for ourselves, not for the community, not for the nation. This is very personal about what you want for yourself. And it's not about what we think is likely or probable. It's about your preference. So we're going to take the blinders off and let ourselves go and really dream big about what you want for your own life.
Okay, I will try my best.
All right. So we're going to go and do a little time travel into your future. Somewhere between 2 and 20 years is what we recommend. How far do you want to go?
I mean, that's a tough one. I have a hard time even thinking about a few months from now. So maybe on the shorter side, a few years.
You want to take 2 years then?
Let's say 4.
4. All right. We got 4 years going on. So here we are in our Zoom time machine. We're going to step into the time machine booth and set the dial for 2029. And as we're whisked away into the future, this future world of yours, I want you to think about things that you're going to see when we get out of the time machine. And you're going to stay your current self, but you're going to observe your 4-year older self. And so everything that I ask you about is like what you can observe from your older self. You got it?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So here we are. We're pulling into the 2029 station and opening the Zoom door. Bing! And the first question that I have for you is just, here we are in 2029. Where are we? And can you describe it a little bit?
Well, I mean, the thing that's top of my mind is, as you guess, for somebody who's passionate about the work I do, I'd love to have a world where we spoke in less contemptuous ways of each other. I mean, that's key to me more than any specific issue we fight over. I think it's kind of like the meta level thing we fight over. So yeah,
well, and I want to bring
you want to get granular. Yeah, you want to get
I want to get really granular, like what city or town or state, like where do you live in? What does it look like?
Well, I live in Portland, Oregon now. I might be here in 4 years, not exactly clear. But I would like, well, kind of like to get more granular. It's like, Portland's one of the more politically passionate, let's say, maybe polarized places. And that's really impacted my relationships, my friendships, and these kinds of things. So I'd like, for my own sake, to find it easier to talk about
Hmm.
issues and topics and not feel judged on across the political spectrum. So just for my own sake of getting back to our own personal goals and wishes, it's like for my own existential interpersonal sake
Yeah.
and friendships and relationships, I'd like to have an America, have a world where it's easier to talk about issues without judgment and anger.
So you're in Portland, Oregon in 2029. Tell me about your neighborhood. Like I lived in Portland for 10 years. Where do you live?
Well, I live in Southeast, near the Trader Joe's there. Some people might
Yep.
know that reference. So go to Trader Joe's a lot. Yeah, I'm not sure what to say. I think like everybody, I'd like to live in a nice neighborhood where everybody is friendly to each other and can have conversations and be social. I think that's kind of everybody's dream about a pleasant community.
Yeah. Well, so what are you going to be most proud of? So as you're observing your older self, you're in your Southeast Portland neighborhood. What are you proud of?
Well, I'd like to, because I focus so much on the polarization aspect, I'd like to think that looking back, I felt like I made some difference on that front. If we're talking about personal wishes, I think no matter what, I'll feel proud that I gave it my best shot and felt like I contributed in some way, no matter how big it was. But yeah, I'd like to. That's probably like top of my mind.
Well, and you're kind of skirting around, you're talking about like the relationships and everything. Is there anything about your relationships, personal or professional, that you're going to be proud of in 4 years? Make up anything you want. This is your preferred life.
Yeah,
So
it's
make
just
it so.
I'm not one who makes a lot of plans, and that's kind of the challenge. I think compared to other people, I don't think a lot about like specifics about the future. That's probably I might be kind of abnormal in that way. But to answer your question, I think I'd like to have more. I'd like to have more of a social network in the future. Like I feel like I've spent so much internal or introspective time on my own working on these kinds of things the last few years and at the detriment to my interpersonal relationships, I think. And I kind of have always thought, well, I'll find more time in the future to, you know,
Yeah.
make more connections, interpersonal and social and such. And I feel like I've just been like heads down the last few years on these kind of really difficult problems that kind of drive you crazy a little bit. So
I want to help you think about like you're getting to observe your perfect preferred future life. So instead of maybe or might, declare it, like own it, make it so, and really like start to feel like what would this world look like for you? And so, when you're talking about what you're going to be most proud of, you know,
I will be doing that. Yeah.
yeah, you're going to have robust relationships, right?
Yeah.
You're going to be proud of the contribution you've made to this community. What else are you going to be proud of?
Let's see. I will be proud of work, social connections.
Well, you have some books that you've already written. Are you going to write another one, or is there anything going
Oh, yeah. Well, that relates to, I will be proud of my work in those areas, which may or may not include another book, because I'm always thinking about ways to repackage what I've already done in like better ways that are more persuasive. So ideally, I will be proud of another project I've done in that space, whether it's a book or some other project that I think is useful. That will have happened.
on? Oh, right. Well, let's think about like how you're spending your time. So you're waking up in 2029 and you're living your preferred life. So how do you spend your day?
I will be spending it with a good, healthy mix of working on things I think are important, mixed with a good, healthy dose of interacting with friends and relationships and socializing. Some healthy mix there.
Yeah. So what's the first thing you do when you get up in the morning? Or maybe the second thing, because
Right. Well, Make coffee. I like to, I've been trying to do more meditation lately. So I'd like to do that more in future, or I will do that more in future, theoretically. I found that helpful recently, getting into that a little bit. So theoretically, that or exercise. I've been trying to do more exercise lately, so will be doing more exercise in future.
Mhm. And you're going to have this mix then. So you're going to wake up, you're going to do some self-care, right? Meditation or exercise. You're going to spend some work time and some interaction time, healthy interactions with people around you. How do you close your day?
Probably a little bit of reading before bed. I do. I like to do that. Probably too much reading in general.
By the way, I don't think that's possible to read too much. Just
Yeah, at a certain level, it becomes kind of escapism. I don't know. Feels that way anyway to me. I'm like, oh, I'll just spend forever in these books. But yeah, I think I will be doing less, unhealthy scrolling on my phone, which is an addictive habit, and I try to always minimize. Even though I try to minimize that, it's too much still these days, and I will be spending less time on my phone.
okay. Less screen time, more book time, more friend time.
Yeah.
So we're about halfway through the interview. How will you feel most of the time? Or if you're observing your older self, how do you feel?
Well, assuming we're living in the world that I wished into existence,
Yep.
I think I'd feel relaxed. I'd feel a weight off my chest from stress perspectives about society stress or interpersonal stress.
Mm.
I'd feel more tuned into myself as a physical being.
And as you're observing your 4-year older self in 2029, what are the observable, like 3, maybe 5 priority values that you can identify that you live by? And qualities might be a better word.
5.
3 to 5. It's an arbitrary number.
Oh, okay. Uh, I would say compassion is one, aka or slash empathy. That would I don't think much would change there. Nuanced approaches, nonpartisan, non-team based approaches to reality or interactions. There's multiple words though.
Yeah, well, and I want to dive in and say in interactions that are human based, maybe
Yeah,
that is that a more clear?
yeah. Humanistic versus more ideological, I guess.
Any other priority values that you're living by?
No, I think that sums it up pretty good.
Okay. Yeah, and I want you to take around your Southeast Portland neighborhood now a little bit. And for you to have this life that you've just kind of outlined, where you have, a dedication to self-care in the morning, you have a good mix of work and personal time, you still have a lot of books to read. I mean, Powell's is right there, right? Um, you're enjoying life, you're feeling relaxed, like the weight of the world has lifted off of your chest. What does your community need to include or provide for this life to be possible for you?
Well, I think some of it relates to the where we're at as a society with the polarization. I find it. I mean, multiple people I talk to in Portland will remark on the difficulty of having conversations, which is partly just where we're at as a society, but probably more so in Portland than some other places. Even there can even be a sense of, some people have remarked, you want to be careful what you say too loudly at bars and stuff. You never know who might be like getting upset with you or these kinds of things. So just I think and that's not to blame the community or the area. It's just kind of where we're at as a society. But I think yeah.
So, putting this into your preferred future, your community actually needs to provide more tolerance for diversity of viewpoint than it does currently.
I think so. Yeah, that's a way to put it. Yeah.
What else does your community need to include or provide?
Well, I feel like this is also another just societal issue. I think, especially post COVID. But I feel like a lot of people have kind of drawn in on themselves a bit, like socially. Like there's just less going on socially, and that was already a problem with like modern society's isolation and loneliness, the bowling alone kind of factors. But I do think like I wish there were more social activities and more of these kinds of things. It feels like, especially post COVID, everyone got used to doing things on their own, and uh, there was less outreach, less socialization.
Well, and from the safety of their screens, I mean, interaction has it has been challenging to re-engage in person,
Yes, yes, yes.
although it's so rich when it does happen. So your community, it sounds like, also needs to provide some opportunity for in-person engagement and neighborliness. I heard a desire for like people just being friendly.
Yeah, I feel like people are scared of each other these days in general. Yeah, kind of pulling into themselves a lot.
Yeah. Well, is there anything that you can do today or in the near future to influence or co-create this community that's going to support your goals for 2029?
I think, it's definitely those things I mentioned could be things I do more of too, because sometimes I'm, I think overly scared of other people, especially doing this polarization related work. I think people are going to judge me, so I can maybe be responsible for pulling away from people. And then also, I could be doing more socialization outreach to other people too, or setting up things to do in real life, So all those things, the things we see in the world are sometimes partially things that we ourselves are a part of. So
Well, I think you've just brilliantly encapsulated why these last two questions are in the interview, because, we have to know what we want in order for us to co-create it
hmm hmm
and to recognize our role in the larger community in which we live.
yeah, yep, yep, totally.
And so, so I appreciate that reflection, that self-reflection that you have.
And I didn't even plan that. See, it just was off the
Yeah,
cuff. It worked
there it
out.
is. There it is. Is there anything that you are already doing that you want to invite others to participate in?
Yeah, I think the thing that most people have been doing lately is signing up for my Substack, seeing my thoughts there, which is diffusingamericananger.substack.com, easy to find. And I like to think I'm putting out some ideas about how we approach these problems that are helpful to people, especially or including in the depolarization or slash bridge building spaces. Because I think it's important to think about the strategies we take and the overall goals, what we're even trying to do. So yeah.
Yeah, well, and I want to ask just a couple of questions. When you're talking about American anger and your Substack on that, how, like, what are people going to find when they go there to your Substack?
Mhm. Yes. On my Substack, I share. Well, lately I've been sharing occasional op-eds I've gotten out there and kind of linking to those and also giving more thoughts because op-eds are often pretty short and wish they were longer, but you got to aim for brevity. But then also sometimes I'll share like excerpts from my book that I think are relevant, or reshare older things that seem relevant for the moment. Like for example, I've shared one about Elon Musk and his polarization, his effective polarization, how he, speaks in highly insulting ways about his enemies and stuff, thing like this that I think is just a problem that conflict leads to for many people, right? It's like what a lot of people, the kind of behavior a lot of people engage in, but with Elon's recent thing, it became more irrelevant again, or people were talking about it, so I reshared that, and it's a way to, a lot of people think that that's just like criticizing what Elon believes, but I'm trying to help people see like we need to separate what people believe from how they engage with other people. Like those need to be, it's really
Yeah.
good to see those as separate dimensions because they so often get conflated, right? It's like we think that, somebody might think I'm criticizing Elon and they're like, oh, he disagrees with Elon, but it's like, no, I'm specifically talking about how he engages with people and how trying to help Elon see it's not even it's in his worst interest to behave that way, even for his own goals and these kinds of things. So I think those kinds of points where it's like these are things that to me scale up and should be persuasive to people, even for their own beliefs. And that I think that's the important part of what I've been doing is helping people see how it's in their own best interest, these ideas. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you touch on that. I'm going to spend just another couple minutes here before we close the interview. So I've been talking on this podcast and in my writing also about this idea of conflict profiteers. and how there are a group of people who are intentionally increasing societal divisions for the sake of profit or influence and power. And so what you're pointing to, Elon used to be the darling of the environmental movement for creating Tesla, right? And he has and expressed this genuine concern about the global climate change efforts, right? And then somewhere in the last few years, he has slid over into speaking, as you've talked about, with these highly demeaning and dehumanizing language and tone, to the extent that he's gaining an influence and power with certain segments of society,
Mhm.
but the overall loss to to civil society and how we see each other. Now he becomes a polarizing figure in the same way that Trump has become a polarizing figure, in the
Mhm.
same way that Democrats or Republicans now
Yeah.
caricature each other
Mhm.
in ways that aren't helpful when we're actually all nuanced, multidimensional beings.
Mhm. Yeah, totally. And it's like, yeah, I think that is, kind of that's kind of what the serious conflict leads so many people to go down that rabbit hole and become, if you want to call them conflict entrepreneurs or some spectrum of that. It's like people start to think like, oh, they're evil and the ends justify the means, and I just need to fight them harder and call out what I see as their evilness, and then just becomes, the more people do that, the more it creates more of the same, and it just builds into this toxic stew. And I think, I would say to Elon, it's like these things aren't helping you. These approaches are actually creating the very pushback and helping building more passion against fighting even your own beliefs than you realize. And so I think, yeah, I think it's like it's just those kind of approaches are bad for society, but I would argue they're even bad for your own goals. Even it might get you something in the short term, but the pendulum can swing the other way, and everyone's going to remember all the dehumanizing things you said about them, and that's going to be part of their pushback in the process. And yeah, so
Well, and I just want to say I'm trying to popularize the word conflict profiteer because I am an entrepreneur, you are an entrepreneur, and I don't want any type of that like connection to be made with what we do
mhm.
and what conflict profiteers do.
Yeah, we're hopefully a de-escalating entrepreneurs, non
And,
anti-conflict entrepreneurs.
and I would also posit that the future that you just created for yourself in 2029 doesn't have that dynamic in it.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
you might think about like what's your work going to be in
Yeah,
2020.
I don't want to do this. That's the thing. Please, like, phase me out of existence. I don't want to be doing this stuff. I only got forced to think about it. I felt like so. It's like, please, somebody.
I want to go write and be an artist.
Yeah, exactly. I'm always telling people I got much more interesting things I want to work on. I just feel like more people need to work on these things. Yeah.
Well, I do want to conclude our interview now, and I'm going to end this interview with an invitation for you and for everyone who's listening out there in Terrified Nation. This invitation is to think about your preferred future. Make it personal, make it detailed, and feel those feelings of what it would be like to actually live there. Because thinking about your future self and feeling those feelings and including a little sense of awe and wonder starts a cycle of good neuroscience where we will subconsciously begin to create that which we think about. And even 5 minutes a day has the power to help us shift the trajectory of our nation. So that is my invitation for you, Zach. So we can choose and create the future, co-create the future, rather than choose from the dystopian options that the conflict profiteers have left with us.
Thank you, Debilyn. Thanks for inviting me on.
And thank you, Zach. So for listeners out there, if you would like to participate in this national research project, visit americanfuture.us and click on the button that says Share Your Future Story. In closing today's show, I'd like to thank you, the listeners, for giving a damn about our nation. We may be a terrified nation today, but we can do better. We can save the USA. Join me next time.
So that's it for today's episode of Terrified Nation. Head on over to iTunes or wherever you listen to subscribe to the show. You can get advance notice of new episodes and bonus content by signing up. Head over to terrifiednation.com and join us on the next episode.